Welcome to today's deep dive. I am really incredibly excited to get into this one with you today.
Oh, me too. It's a fun one.
Yeah, it really is. Because usually, we spend our time synthesizing these massive research papers or sprawling historical biographies or really dense journalistic investigations.
Right, the heavy stuff.
Exactly. But today, our source material is brief. Actually, it's exactly 6 sentences long.
Which is wild.
It is. It's this piece of microtext titled The Domestic Harvest of Delusion. And, you might be looking at your device right now and wondering how we could possibly spend this entire session exploring a text that you can read in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it sounds impossible on the surface.
Right. But our mission today is to demonstrate the sheer density of narrative, of psychology, and relationship dynamics that are packed into this tiny space. We're going to look at how a few carefully constructed lines of dialogue can serve as this really profound examination of the human condition.
I mean, it is a phenomenal exercise in reading comprehension and critical analysis. When a text is this compressed, every single word carries immense structural weight.
It really does.
We don't have chapters of exposition to rely on, which means we have to rigorously interrogate the subtext, the omissions, and the assumptions being made by the characters. It forces us to act as, like, literary detectives.
I love that. Literary detectives. And to make sure you have the full picture before we start that interrogation, I'm going to read the source material aloud for you right now in its entirety.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay, here is the complete text of The Domestic Harvest of Delusion. A man takes his wife to the psychiatrist. The doctor asks, "How can I help you?" The man replies, "Can you help my wife? She thinks she is a chicken." The doc asks, "How long has this been going on?" The man says, "Oh, about 5 years." The doctor exclaims, "Why haven't you brought her in before?" The man says, "We needed the eggs."
It's just brilliant.
Okay, let's unpack this, because my immediate reaction to reading this is just a deep appreciation for the economy of the writing.
Oh, absolutely.
In 6 sentences, we are given a complete setting, a complex 3-way character dynamic, a history, and a major psychological pivot right at the end.
It's structured with the precise rhythm of a traditional joke.
Yeah.
You have the setup, the escalation, and the punchline.
Right? It reads like a joke.
It does, but if we stop at the laugh, we miss the actual value of the text.
Yeah.
It uses the mechanics of humor as a delivery system for a rather unsettling commentary on mutual dependence, the fragility of objective reality, and how individuals normalize the absurd.
Then let's bypass the joke and get straight to the commentary. I want to structure this deep dive by moving chronologically through the text, starting with the title, then moving into the clinical encounter, examining that insane 5-year timeline, and finally tearing apart that last line.
That's perfect.
Let's start right at the top. The title, The Domestic Harvest of Delusion.
The title is our interpretive lens for everything that follows. Let's look at the juxtaposition of the words domestic and delusion.
Okay, yeah.
Domestic firmly roots the narrative in the private sphere. The home, a marriage, the daily routine.
Right, grounds it.
Exactly. It takes the concept of severe psychiatric delusion and strips it of its clinical or chaotic associations. It places the madness right in the living room.
Right, it establishes an ecosystem. But I want to push on the word harvest.
Go for it.
Because if the author had called it, say, the domestic burden of delusion or the tragedy of delusion, we would approach the husband with immediate sympathy.
Of course we would.
But harvest implies agricultural extraction. It implies a process that is cultivated, managed, and ultimately utilized for a yield.
That is the crucial distinction. A harvest is not something that happens to you. It is something you actively participate in.
Right, you plan for it.
You prepare for it, you rely on it. By framing the delusion as a harvest, the title preemptively indicts the husband. It suggests that the delusion is not a disease to be cured, but a resource to be managed.
Which brings up the final word of the title, delusion. Whose delusion are we actually talking about here?
It's the big question.
On a first read, it seems completely obvious that it's the wife's delusion. She thinks she's a chicken.
Right.
But considering the concept of a harvest, I start to wonder if the title refers to a collective delusion.
I would argue the title intentionally leaves that ambiguous to reflect the systemic nature of their reality. The delusion belongs to the household. It is a shared infrastructure.
Let's carry that idea of shared infrastructure into the opening scene, sentence 1. A man takes his wife to the psychiatrist. We are immediately placed in a clinical setting. This is a space defined by rationality, observation, and established medical norms.
Very grounded.
And the man is positioned as the agent of action. He is taking his wife to get help.
And the doctor opens with a perfectly standard, open-ended diagnostic question. How can I help you? What's fascinating here is the assumption the doctor makes in that moment.
What do you mean?
Well, the doctor looks at the couple and instinctively identifies the husband as the reliable narrator, the anchor to reality. The doctor's question is directed at the room, but it relies on a baseline of shared sanity between the medical professional and the caretaker.
But the caretaker's response is where that assumption starts to fracture. The man says, "Can you help my wife? She thinks she is a chicken."
Right.
There is something incredibly jarring about his delivery. He speaks for her, diagnosing her with this bizarre condition in a completely flat, transactional manner.
I wouldn't just call it jarring. I'd call it revealing. Notice the clinical detachment there.
Yeah, there's no emotion.
None. He doesn't say, "My wife is suffering," or "We are going through a terrible crisis." He presents her condition as a mechanical failure. He has brought her into the psychiatric shop to be fixed.
Like taking a car to the mechanic.
Exactly. It highlights a massive disconnect between the severity of her psychological state and his emotional response to it.
That's a sharp observation. If your partner suddenly believed they were poultry, you would expect panic, confusion, perhaps deep grief.
Real distress.
But his emotional register is completely flat. He states, she thinks she is a chicken, with the same cadence one might use to say, she has a mild cough.
Which perfectly sets up the doctor's next move. The doctor, representing the listener and society at large, begins the diagnostic process. How long has this been going on?
Yeah.
This is the moment the text begins to rapidly escalate.
And the husband replies, oh, about 5 years.
Yeah.
We really need to pause on this. The timeline fundamentally alters the nature of the narrative. 5 years.
Half a decade.
This isn't a sudden break from reality. This isn't a brief, terrifying episode that prompted an immediate rush to the emergency room.
No, not at all.
I mean, imagine for a second living with a situation like this for an entire week.
Uh-oh.
Stress of that, let alone 5 years.
It's almost unimaginable. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this interaction illustrates the profound elasticity of human normalcy.
Elasticity, I like that.
When an anomaly is introduced into a closed relational system, there's an initial period of friction. But over a timeline of 5 years, that anomaly undergoes a process of structural accommodation.
Let's look closer at that concept of structural accommodation. Because over 5 years, this delusion would dictate everything about their lives.
Everything.
It dictates their social interactions, their daily routines, literally the physical layout of their home. To sustain this for 5 years means the husband didn't just passively observe the delusion, he actively built a life architecture that could support it.
Exactly. The threshold for what constitutes normal has shifted entirely to protect the ecosystem of the relationship. And notice the word he uses to introduce the timeline.
Oh, about 5 years.
Yeah.
The dismissiveness of it, it's a masterpiece of comedic understatement.
It is a brilliant linguistic marker of his desensitization. The O suggests that the duration is trivial, a mere afterthought.
Like he's checking his watch.
Right. He is oblivious to the fact that waiting 5 years to seek psychiatric help for a severe delusion is, in itself, highly abnormal behavior.
Which is why the doctor's reaction in the next line is so critical. Up until this point, the doctor has been neutral, professional.
Playing the role.
But here, the text says the doctor exclaims, why haven't you brought her in before? The doctor's professional neutrality completely breaks.
The doctor's exclamation is the intrusion of objective reality into the couple's closed system. It is the moment the doctor realizes that the husband is not a reliable narrator.
The illusion of the same caretaker is shattered.
His status as the rational caretaker completely disintegrates. The question, why haven't you brought her in before, is an accusation. It demands that the husband justify his complicity in maintaining a psychiatric crisis for half a decade.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The husband's justification. The final sentence of the text. The doctor asks why he waited 5 years, and the man replies, we needed the eggs.
It is a devastating structural pivot.
I mean, it's an absolute shock.
With those 5 words, the narrative violently shifts from a story about a sick patient and a delayed caretaker to a story about a symbiotic shared psychosis.
I want to really scrutinize the nature of the husband's delusion here because it is distinctly different from the wife's.
Yes, very different.
The wife is suffering from an internal identity-based delusion. Her mind has fractured and she believes she is an animal. But the husband, he says, we needed the eggs. He is claiming a tangible physical yield from her psychological state.
This raises an important question about the varieties of madness. The text introduces a highly pragmatic variation of folie à dos.
A shared delusion.
Right, a shared delusion. But he hasn't adopted her belief that she is a chicken out of empathy or proximity. He has adopted the belief that she produces eggs. His delusion is entirely utilitarian.
Which is arguably much more disconnected from reality.
How so?
Well, it's one thing for a human mind to lose its grasp on its own identity. It is another thing entirely for an ostensibly sane observer to hallucinate a physical agricultural product manifesting in their living room.
That's a fair point.
He isn't just humoring her to keep the peace. He genuinely believes there were eggs.
I would actually push back on that slightly.
Okay, tell me.
The text leaves room for interpretation regarding his literal belief in the eggs. While he may be hallucinating physical eggs, we also have to consider the metaphorical weight of the statement. We needed eggs could represent secondary gain.
Secondary gain. Tell me more about how you see that operating here.
In psychology, secondary gain refers to the hidden, often subconscious benefits someone derives from a negative situation.
Okay.
By maintaining his wife's delusion for 5 years, what was he avoiding? What was the psychological egg he was harvesting?
Oh, wow.
Perhaps her severe illness gave him total control over the household. Perhaps it isolated them, meaning he never had to face external social pressures or his own personal failures. He had a built-in, unassailable excuse for everything. He had to tend to the harvest.
That is a fascinating alternate reading. If the eggs are the psychological shield the delusion provides him, then his complicity is even more cynical.
Much more.
He wasn't trapped by her madness. He was leveraging it.
And look at the pronoun he uses. We needed the eggs. He doesn't say I needed them. He implicates her in the necessity of the harvest. He projects his own reliance on the dysfunction onto the household as a collective unit.
That reframes the entire reason they are in the doctor's office in the first place. Think about the catalyst for this appointment.
The timing.
Exactly. Why today? Why, after 1,825 days of this routine, did he finally walk her in to a psychiatric clinic?
Following the logic of the narrative, he brought her in because the harvest stopped.
Exactly. She stopped laying. It's not that he finally recognized the psychological toll of her condition or that he had a sudden crisis of conscience.
No.
It's that the utility of the delusion ran out. The delusion ceased to be profitable, whether in literal hallucinated eggs or in psychological secondary gain, and therefore, it finally became a medical problem to be fixed.
It reduces the psychiatric visit to a maintenance request.
Wow, yeah.
He is asking the doctor to repair the machine so the harvest can continue. It completely subverts the traditional dynamic of mental health care. The doctor thinks they're there to cure the delusion, but the text heavily implies the husband wants the delusion optimized.
Let's consider the position this leaves the doctor in. The doctor is sitting across from a woman who thinks she's a bird and a man who is frustrated by a lack of imaginary eggs.
It's absurd.
The baseline of shared sanity that the doctor assumed at the beginning of the text is just gone.
The doctor is now tasked with treating a closed system of dysfunction rather than an individual patient.
Right.
The text serves as a cautionary tale for anyone in an observational or intervening role. It warns us that the person presenting the problem is often an active participant in maintaining it.
So, bringing all this together, how do we take this microfiction about a far-mirrored delusion and apply it to the reality we navigate every day?
It's the big so what.
Right, what does this mean for you, the listener? Because while it's highly unlikely anyone in your life thinks they are producing literal eggs, the psychological mechanics of this text are playing out constantly in the real world.
It requires us to examine the concept of normalization in our own environments. We all exist within relational systems, families, workplaces, social circles.
Yeah.
And within those systems, anomalies and dysfunctions inevitably arise. The text challenges us to identify how quickly we adapt to those dysfunctions rather than addressing them.
It's about recognizing the architectures we build to support things that are fundamentally broken. I mean, think about a toxic workplace where aggressive behavior is just dismissed as, well, that's just how the boss is.
A classic example.
Or a family dynamic where one person's severe unreliability is constantly covered up by everyone else.
Those are perfect examples of structural accommodation. The people in those environments aren't necessarily unaware of the dysfunction, but they have adjusted their baseline of reality to incorporate it.
They work around it.
They have learned to navigate around the metaphorical chicken in the room.
And the most uncomfortable part of that realization is asking why we accommodate it. The domestic harvest of delusion forces us to confront the secondary gains we might be extracting from situations we claim to hate.
It demands rigorous self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's very easy to point at someone else's delusion or bad behavior and diagnose it.
Anyone can do that.
It is much harder to examine your own complicity in allowing that behavior to continue. Are you staying in a chaotic dynamic because it makes you feel needed? Are you tolerating a broken system because fixing it would require a level of confrontation you are trying to avoid?
Are you harvesting the dysfunction?
That's a question.
That is the brilliance of this 6-sentence story. It sneaks past your defenses as a simple joke. It's a Trojan horse.
It really is.
It sneaks in, but it leaves you questioning the shared delusions within all long-term relationships. It asks you to define the boundary between supporting someone and utilizing their instability for your own comfort.
The text suggests that pure objective reality is incredibly fragile, and that humans are deeply prone to constructing shared alternate realities if it serves a pragmatic purpose. The husband's sanity wasn't compromised by proximity to the delusion, it was compromised by his own perceived needs.
So as we wrap up our analysis of this incredibly dense piece of microtext, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've spent this time breaking down the husband, the wife, and the doctor.
Right.
We've analyzed their motivations, their timelines, and the ecosystem of their shared reality. But now turn that analytical lens on your own life.
Critical thinking means questioning your own participation.
Exactly. Look at the structures, the relationships, and the daily routines you have built. Identify the absurdities you have stopped noticing. And ask yourself this: what is a dysfunctional situation or broken dynamic that you have been quietly tolerating or perhaps actively protecting simply because you've convinced yourself that you need the eggs?
It is a profound question, and answering it honestly is the only way to ensure you aren't the one maintaining the harvest.
Well said. We have taken a few lines of dialogue and excavated an entire philosophy of human behavior from them. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
Whether we are parsing through volumes of data or dissecting 6 sentences of fiction, the goal is always to sharpen our critical thinking and look beneath the surface of the narrative. Until next time, question the baselines you've accepted and examine what you are harvesting. Take care.